Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present yet another installment in my series of Community Spotlight videos, in which I interview various prominent and upstanding members of the Conquest LCG community. Specifically, we discuss their favorite decks and how best to play their favorite warlords. Hopefully, through sharing their personal experience, opinions, and advice, they'll be able to provide you with a wealth of information useful to both new and veteran players alike. Be sure to let me know what you think of this interview in the comments below, and as always, I remain ever receptive to constructive criticism. But with our introduction aside, let's get things started with a discussion of Aun'shi. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, but before the Ethereals learn to launch artillery or orbital strikes against us directly from their headquarters, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let our viewers know just a little bit about how you're involved in our Conquest community.
Well, thank you for the invite, Mitch. My name is Ryan. I go by Boxduck on Card Game Database. As for the community, I'm really kind of your average player. I have had quite a bit of success in tournaments and have had the opportunity to play with some, well-known players like the guys from the Concast and meet a lot of them personally, and that's kind of how I got where I am.
Definitely. You came highly recommended from some very, seriously competitive people.
Yeah, and I'm very flattered by that. And like I said, they're all great guys, and, I've done well against them. As for me personally and my experience with Concast, I was a day one guy, researched it before it came out, learned what I could, got really into it. As for my general experience, I'm kind of completely new to the whole idea of competitive card games. I started with Warhammer Invasion, 2 months before Conquest came out, and that was my first card game since I was 10.
Okay.
But, I enjoy the whole universe. I've read almost all of the Warhammer books, Warhammer 40K, Horus Heresy, all that. I've always been into the universe at large.
Sure.
And I did try.
I suppose, was it kind of the universe itself that sucked you in? I mean, that's quite a long pause for, not having touched a card game in so many years.
Yeah, just life things happen and you got to deal with stuff. And I didn't have the time to be a kid per se, but anyways, it was fun to get into it because I got back into reading and it was, good for me. And that's where I found it. And I was always into the medieval fantasy dragons and stuff like that, so Warhammer really, drew me in, just the whole concept of it. Like I said, just was real into it, got Warhammer Invasion, played it with my wife maybe 2-3 times, and found out about competitive games. And I'm like, that'd be fun. It'd be cool to meet new people because, I had wanted to, meet people of similar interests because I hadn't gotten to do that before.
Sure.
And found out that the game had been discontinued, so I'm like, oh, well, what the crap, I can't do this now. And then I found a link to Warhammer Conquest. Researching it heavily, got super into it, got it as soon as it came out, and, tried to research my area, down in Florida here, and the only place I could find that there was support was 2.5 hours away from me at the time.
That sounds very much like my situation.
Yeah, and me, I'm okay with computers, but, like I said, I got married last year in November and bought a house, a few months ago, so it's been kind of a tumult of, things going on and, couldn't keep up with everything, so I haven't been able to do Octagon or things like that. I will soon, and I'm ready to play everybody on there. I can't wait to play some of these guys because I know there's a lot of good people on there.
Definitely.
I can't wait to get a game against them, but...
Well, I suppose just because you've been so busy, congratulations on the marriage, buying a house. Sounds like a hell of a lot has been going on in your life. Quite the time to get started in such a competitive card game, especially considering our online meta here is full of so many, regional tournament or national, even world tournament winning folks. it's definitely a strong competition that you and I are up against. But apart from that rich and expansive universe, what was it about the game itself that really keeps you coming back with everything else you've obviously got going on in your life?
I just have a really competitive nature. Like I'm super competitive and I need to compete
Sure.
on a regular basis. And it got to a point, I needed something because I was playing sports and stuff like that, but a lot of the teams I was playing with, if you get married and stuff, you lose contact with a lot of people and you get out the loop. And I'm like, well, I want to go back to what I did as a kid because I didn't get to experience it as I wanted to. I want to get back into that because it did interest me through the reading material and stuff like that, which I kept up with, but I never got to do a game of this fashion. And because I'm competitive, the competitive side of it naturally just drew me to it.
Definitely. Well, I suppose just in having people come on and do these community spotlight interviews, and again, I very much appreciate you fitting me into your busy schedule to come on today. Out of all the different factions, out of all the different warlords we've seen so far, you happen to choose Aun'shi as one of your personal favorites. But what is it about our second Tau warlord that really stands out to you? Like, what's the unique appeal there?
No, actually, Shadow Sun was the first warlord I ever picked up when the game first came out, and I
Okay.
actually took her to my first tournament, where I met Eric from the Concast, and had my first game against him, and just got face rolled by a Zerathir Orc deck, and that was my first foray into Conquest. But I enjoy Tau in general. I like all the factions, honestly, because this is the only game I play. I don't play like Game of Thrones or anything like that. This is my thing, basically.
Sure.
So, I dabble in many warlords. Like, I try and run about 3 decks at once, and right now I'm messing with Eldorath. I'm fooling with Strachan because I'm getting ready for Broderick War coming out. I'm really excited about him. And Kugath, mainly because Eric's been fooling with him, and I like to kind of do whatever's going on in Florida.
Right.
So Shadow Sun is really interesting because of the attachments, and I believe you had Community Spotlight with one of the girls from the Command Struggle?
Tactical Squad. Yeah,
Tactical
Elizabeth
Squad.
came on to rep the other Tau warlord.
Mhm. And she said it perfectly. She covered everything, and that's what Shadow Sun is. And with these new cards coming out in the Tyranid box, Shadow Sun should actually be doing a lot better now. Just the recursion with Repair Bay and the Pathfinder or so or something. Just the, drop an attachment or I mean, that's going to be crazy. I mean, really, the only weakness, is still the routing effect, but, hopefully Tal gets something to deal with that.
Right, and it's definitely useful to have all the more tools and instruments at one's disposal, but, I suppose the reason why I kind of sought you out to talk about Aun'shi is certainly it sounds like you've got a diverse base of warlords you like to choose and play from, but, when people mention Aun'shi, they think about maybe overpoweredness or even brokenness and just a devastating ability to destroy people. And when it comes to players that are specifically able to pick their opponents apart, you did indeed come highly recommended. So I suppose, why would someone want to choose Aun'shi over Commander Shadow Sun?
Pretty simply, Armor Bane. It is the most evil thing in this game right now. I know Archon's Terror and certain cards people, have certain, diverse hatred for, but Armor Bane is the most evil thing in this game to me. It basically says, when I attack, you're going to die. There is nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. And that type of leverage is huge in this game, like routing effects or really those game-changing effects like that change the board state. Nothing changes the board state like unshieldable damage. I mean, I can't tell you every game I play, when I'm swinging with an Armor Bane and my opponent just stares at their hand, and I know they're staring at 3 and 4 shields that they just can't do anything with.
Sure.
And I mean, it's right up there with, like, for me, like routing effects, exhausting effects, things like that. I mean, Armor Bane is that to me, basically. It's just a very powerful effect. And you mix that with Armor Bane, and it just makes people sad.
You mean when you mix it with area effect, or?
I'm sorry, yes, area of effect.
Yes,
Armor Bane and area of effect.
I've heard some very, very nasty things about some ethereal units loaded up with gun drones, just absolutely devastating the opposition. But overall, what do you feel are Anshi's greatest strengths? So apart from the obvious inability to drop, shield cards between incoming damage and your own units, like what else do people have to be afraid of when it comes to playing against an Aunshi opponent?
Mobility, the surprise attack. You always have to worry about, the prelate coming in for 4 costs. It's always got to be in the back of your mind when it's a combat round and they got 4 resources. On Shi's initiative, the opponent should be sweating at that point because all on Shi needs is like 2, maybe 1 or 2 cards to set something up, and your warlord could be bloodied that turn.
Right.
So it requires a different kind of play. I mean, anytime you're playing against Aunshi and it's Anshi's initiative and you stay for more than the first combat round, you're taking a huge risk.
Well, definitely. I suppose the Ennui Prelate, like you mentioned, can definitely, unexpectedly change the math of combat. So, seeing as how you're dealing with Armor Bane in the first place, you can't shield that damage. If you're suddenly taking more than you were expecting, that can be, a bit of a table-flipping moment in and of itself. But what are some of those other linchpin cards that people just absolutely hate and, go to the card game DB forums and debate whether or not they're overpowered or broken or should be nerfed? What are some of those other, major threats?
Well, we might as well deal with the elephant in the room and just go ahead and talk about the Orbital City and get that out the way.
Definitely.
I mean, I every term I went to, everyone has their own opinion, raise the cost, make it limited, or, make it a unique, and things like that. And they're not far off. It is a super powerful card and everything, but I mean, Aunshi needs it. I mean, even if it was 3 costs, you still run it ×3. It's a great card. I can agree it's probably a little cheap for what it does. I mean, the any planet plus a ready effect, that's insane. I mean, but then you can look at cards like Clayvex, ambush in, immediately destroy any unit with 1 damage on it, basically. I mean, that's murder for anyone that's playing against the DE and they're trying to run heavy elite units or something like that. They're constantly worried about that. I mean, it's no different. Now, the Kismet Orbital City is definitely, in my opinion, the most powerful card right now, simply for what it does. You can initiate battles where you want. Your Warlord comes in ready. You can trigger it off more than just your Warlord. I have in an Aunshi deck, 2 of the signature cards was Ethereal Wisdom. I can put that on any of my other, bigger tile units, pop them to a planet, and hit you for, 3+ damage you're not expecting, because I would only use that on big damage,
Right.
I mean,
So
without it,
I was just going to mention, for anybody that doesn't happen to know, maybe for someone newer to the game or that just hasn't had the ill fortune of running up against Aunshi, the way that the Casimien Orbital City functions is you exhaust the support to move an ethereal from your HQ to any target planet you'd like, and then you ready that unit. And when you happen to mention Ethereal Wisdom, that can make any unit an ethereal, so essentially anything you'd like can be moved to any planet and ready to attack when it makes the most sense to do so. And seeing as how Aunshi gives it Armor Bane, that combined with a whole host of other effects can be just absolutely maddening.
yes, and sadly there aren't as many effects to deal with things like that, and that's where a lot of people are kind of getting frustrated with it, because it's creating situations where literally there's nothing you can do besides just get hit in the face.
Sure. I mean, it's not even a signature attachment. It's just a 2-cost non-unique.
Yeah, and I could have, all 3 out. I could have 2 in my opening hand, and I mean, if I do that, you're immediately on your back foot when I'm playing against someone. At least the way I run my deck and the way I can set stuff up, it can put you on your back foot immediately, and that is, without a doubt, the strongest on-sheet card there is. A ×3 all day, and definitely something that's going to be under discussion until something new and overpowered comes out just like it.
Right. Well, I suppose just what are some of those combos or synergistic effects that you do try to set up? How do you, I guess, first off, do you normally go for Warlord kills, or do you try to go for more conventional victories?
Me personally, and this is the beauty of Aun'shi, is that he's really versatile and he really fits multiple play styles. You have your aggressive players that just want to go straight for the Warlord, take them out as quick as possible. He's perfect for it. Problem is you're relying more on the draw and so on and so forth. You're kind of losing your command. Me personally, I built an Aun'shi deck that is a lot more stable, and at the time, I didn't see anyone else using it. Someone could have, but I figured out Land Raiders were the way to go. I dropped my prelates and deception, which, people were shocked by, and I added 2 tactical squads. So I run 4 Space Marine units in my deck.
Okay.
The Land Raider is just golden. You throw it on plant 1 wherever, and you have it follow your Warlord around. Dark Eldar players hate it. The tactical squad, that's my AoE control right there. It adds to my mentality of playstyle where I'm going to be here. You see what I have. Can you handle it, basically?
Sure.
And I also run a lot of cheap units. I run I run 2 Rogue Traders, 3 Void Pirates. I got my Recon drones. I run a few Earthcast Technicians, the Vasha Trailblazer. Tactical squad, to an extent, can be used as a command unit. I'm very heavy on that, and many games, when I'm looking to my opening hand, I'm looking for 3 to 4 guys to throw out in command, and 9 times out of 10, I will get that.
Sure.
So I'm known for spreading out first turn. I'm going to win something, but I feel like that has to be done for Aun'shi because he is so dependent on the draw. If he's not drawing cards, he's not doing anything, and you just won't win. He's one of the most reliant Warlords. He can't just, pull out that one card and say it's a day like some Warlords can. He really needs, 2 cards to pull off what he needs, or, he really needs that Orbital City out there, which all things you really need on the draw.
Right. Well, I suppose, are there any specific matchups where he really shines, really excels? Like any factions or Warlords in particular that he just, stands an excellent chance against?
Me personally, I found I eat Kodiaz alive. Basically, every time I played him, I was just able to beat the crap out of him. Like I said, that was just my meta and stuff, and I probably just knew the players I was a little too well. I'm pretty good at calling where people will commit to,
Okay.
and that has always helped me before. Kodiaz, good matchup. Who else?
Well, I suppose, what is it about Kotiaz that you can really exploit?
The fact that he has to have the units there to attack, and because I'm spreading out on command, Kodiaz likes to run, he runs a lot of weenies too, and usually guys are running staging grounds and stuff like that.
Right.
And I more so focus on the little guys and make sure that the little guys die. And because I do tend to focus on AoE in my deck, I have a very high focus on that and getting that to key battles, and I will always have a guy there to pop AoE. You better have someone to deal with them. So, that always helps because, a lot of those guys are 2-3 health, and I'll get to some other card combos that I personally enjoy that also, I usually will win the battle in the first round. If the battle goes to the second round, I'm usually not winning. I will normally win in the first round of combat on my first swing or the second swing. If I'm not winning by that point, I probably shouldn't have been in that battle.
Sure.
That's how I feel Aun'shi is supposed to work. It's just supposed to be overwhelming, armor bane, deal with it. And then if you can't, get off the planet.
Sure. Well, I suppose any other, situations in regard to, like, entering a match, any other Warlords that you serve a pretty solid chance of winning against?
Orcs are usually pretty easy for me to take down with Aun'shi just because they rely on the brutal and stuff like that. And I know that sounds off because they do have a lot of high HP and, dealing with, doing more than just the 2 AoE or like popping guy for 4 armor bane. That's not killing an enraged orc. What are you going to do?
Right.
It's really with orcs, you just have to get that amount of damage in before it gets to that point or let them hurt themselves. Like what I like to do with orcs is I'll force a battle that I know I'm going to lose, but I want them to brutalize their guys. I want them to set them up. And if I'm doing that, I have a marksman and a gun drone in my hand that I'm putting on the next planet. And if you show up there, all your blue-eyes guys are about to die to an AoE 2 armor bane.
Right, right.
I mean, it's all, there's good and bad matchups, but I think this game comes down to play style. I mean, I could get beat by a Zogwart at Nazdrake. I could get beat by Cody Ass. It just depends on how you play. I know this is probably an awkward way of thinking, but I don't look to good and bad matchups. I look to what they bring to the table, basically,
Right.
and the opponent that I'm playing. I feel like I can beat anybody, and anyone can beat me anytime I go into a game.
Sure. I mean, just kind of the secret behind asking a question like that isn't so much like X beats Y. It's kind of an exploration of the mechanics as to, how does Aun'shi perform well? What kind of context does he thrive against? Like, for instance, with your Kotiaz matchup, in being able to do a lot of unpreventable damage, Kotiaz doesn't have a large number of units to sacrifice. Like, if he can't prevent all that area effect damage you're outputting, then he can't fuel his, sacrifice effects and all sorts of different things like that. So I definitely like where some of these deceptively simple questions can go. So really the, deep dive and that, real thought experimentation gets to the whole heart of things.
Right. And like I said, Zerathur, I could have a great game against. Technically I'm set up for that movement. He's on any 6 health warlord, honestly, is disadvantaged to Aun'shi because of the stuff that can be tied together and then hit with. And 6 armor bane is really not that hard to come by with the cards that Aun'shi is given, or that, the normal cards that someone will put in their deck. So, I mean, it's a constant threat. So it's more on the hunt side, which I don't lean to. But really, any 6 HP warlord, you need to be worried.
Sure. Well, and you happen to mention that one of your, kind of your go-to allied factions seems to be Space Marines. It provides non-vehicle units immunity to enemy events. You've got your attack squads that do area effect damage. Are there any other Space Marine units you ever consider including?
The Eager Recruit. And that was it. I did the Eager Recruit trying to be on a more aggressive Space Marine deck. Like, I dropped my Land Raiders, I kept my Tactical Squad, and kind of put in the Eager Recruits as a switch out. Just because, Eager Recruit's a great card. You pop it in, it's at 2 damage, you never see it coming. I know it's not Armor Bane, but something also that I want to talk about with Aun'shi is Armor Bane is great, but it's a double-edged sword. Because you can't use those cards as shields, right?
Right.
But how many games have you played where you use the card as a shield, and the next turn you're like, man, I wish I would have used that. Or you use the card as a shield as a mistake, not knowing what else I had in my hand, and I still win the battle. So it was sort of a waste,
Definitely.
And you could have used it for the next battle. I mean, that happens constantly. What Armor Bane does, sadly, is it forces good decisions, if that makes sense.
Right.
What I found.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and it definitely ensures, like you were alluding to, that your opponent's hand is going to be full of drop pod assaults and gift of Ishas and all sorts of other nasty stuff that they're going to be more than happy to play against you.
Mm-hmm. Instead of forcing them to use them on a battle they think they might win, they can't. And it's guaranteeing me a win, but it's kind of setting up, obstacles for me in the future game. And that's with almost any warlord. Everyone puts event cards in their decks that do something nasty. No one puts an event card in just for shields.
Right.
They're going to do something. Maybe some Marines with Iron Halo, but usually if an event card's in your deck, at least personally I feel, it better do something besides a shield. And my personal Aun'shi deck, I rarely shield. I have very few shield cards, but that's just the way I play, where I play to where I minimize my mistakes. And if I'm going into something, I better win. I've accounted for what you can do, and I'm going to stop it. That way I don't have to shield. That's what coming in and winning in the range phase, or the first swing of combat, really is the key to my deck that I play in my play style, is I have to win that. Because if I get into a long, drawn-out battle, I can't do anything. I can't shield it. And my opponent might as well have Armor Bane at that point.
Right. You hopefully never get to the point where your opponent can exploit and take advantage of all those different weaknesses you've got.
Right.
And I suppose since we've started heading down that kind of dangerous and treacherous road, where are Anshi's area of vulnerabilities? So you mentioned Armorbane, make sure that your opponent has plenty of events and attachments, but what are some of those other things that Aunshi doesn't exactly excel at?
In the more aggressive style, when people will, ally with the Eldar, the weakness is obviously swarms. You're lacking your AoEs and stuff. You have your gun drones, but a lot of factions have ways to deal with units like the routing effect, the exhausts, their own ranged units to deal with it. So really it comes in the form of swarms. Zogwart has always been a trouble until I went to Space Marines, and then it was just cake at that point.
Sure.
Kith is pretty difficult, but not so much for the swarm, even though it's like you're getting a two-punch in the face. She's choking you, so that's your first weakness, is you're not getting cards. Second weakness, I'm not being able to deal with Chimera, so.
Right.
That's just an awful matchup, and I really, really despise playing Kith, especially a really good Kith player.
Well, I suppose just in regard to your changing from, Eldar to Space Marines, certainly I've heard endless talk about gun drones and all sorts of nightmarish Armorbane combos with those. What really pushed you away from allying with them? It seems like that's such a complete powerhouse. Is it just more consistent victory with Space Marines, or?
Yes, me personally, I found it was more consistency, and whenever I'm building a deck, I look at the deck as it having a purpose. You can build a Warlord however you want, and people like to throw in all kinds of stuff into the mix, and then they make what they want, and it could be just 20 different things going on, but my deck is built for one purpose, to cover Anshi's weaknesses, what I feel is staying power, because he has to run away a lot unless you have your orbital cities, or you have to burn a Canyon Strike, basically, to get him back, and that's always his issue, is he can't stay in the battle when you need him.
Sure.
And the Land Raider helps with that. And also the swarm issue. I really wanted extra area effect in the gun drones because, Aunshi doesn't really have that protection for the attachments, basically. And Aunshi is not usually very attachment heavy. Me personally, I run 6 attachments. I treat those things like gold when I get them out. And that's also some other cards that I choose for my deck building, ensure that I protect those. Because if I don't have attachments, then I'm losing.
Well, I suppose, you've mentioned that Aunshi is basically forced to retreat after he attacks, and the same thing goes with his Ethereal Envoy. Is there really any kind of strategy for if you don't get those Canyon Strikes, if you don't get the Xemian Orbital Cities, is there any, advice you could give to players for how to try and work around that, to try and get the most out of Aunshi if, those combo pieces aren't coming together?
Kill everything in the first shot.
Okay.
That's really all you can do. Besides that, it's a build-up. It's not just, plant or turn 1, turn 2. Unless you draw the cards, then you can do it. But you really need to have someone's going to stay there. And sadly, a lot of Tau units are pretty flimsy. They have lower HP that is dealt with pretty easily.
Right.
Like the Borkan recruits. I think even the new 4-cost guy, hold on a second, I'll get his name. The Valora Warrior Cadre, which was the new one, it is a 4-cost, 4 attack, 3 health, 1 command icon, reading, this unit gains ranged while you control an ethereal unit at this planet. Besides the Land Raider, personally, that's what I like to run. That's my biggest unit. And 3 damage is not that hard to pump out for any Warlord.
Definitely.
So you really need to go into a battle prepared. You can't just run in a battle and think you got 3 guys there so you're going to be okay. With Aunshi, you really have to plan these things out. If, let's say, it's turn 1 and you don't have your Canyon Strikes, you don't have your Orbital Cities, and you just got Aunshi, and you really want to win the first planet, so you drop, let's say, a Borkan recruit with a Valora Marksman. Just you want to put that threat there, like, I'm going to fight it. But Anshi's going to get there. The obvious thing is swing last with Aunshi, get your Armorbane shots in, let them know you're there. They know he's going to have to run away. You have no way to get him back. The best thing I can do for you there is play with confidence. Act like you got it, basically. You know, swing there. Put them back. Put them back in your headquarters and look at it. And when you're going into the next phase, and this is where bluffing comes into play, you look at them and say, I'm staying. And just let them know you're there. You're ready to commit to that battle. And they'll think twice about having to eat more armor bane. Anybody, you get hit with armor bane the first time, you're going to remember it.
Definitely. I suppose, how do you approach combat in the early game? You said you kind of take a more reserved or conservative approach than the ultra-aggressive, in-your-face Aun'shi. Are you just trying to pick off command units, or, how do you do things before you set up that, one-punch knockout?
Normally I will, like you said, go after command units, because honestly, if I'm trying to win command, I'm going after your command units. I have 2 turns before I technically have to get into the fight. With Aunshi, it is a normal thing. A lot of people will drop the first, maybe even the second planet. A lot of more experienced players will do that because they're setting things up, and that's what you have to do with the Aunshi, especially because you need to get all the pieces, and then you need to tie them together. You can't just throw something out there and hope it sticks with Aunshi because, like I said, he's flimsy. He runs away. He's the force retreat. And that's how I would suggest playing, how I like to play. I will snipe command units. I will trigger battle abilities where I need to because that's the key. What I like to do is put maybe 1 or 2 extra command units at a planet. If I have my good spread, I always go 1 for 1, like 1 unit for 1 planet, until I have at least 4 of the 5 planets covered. That's a personal thing of mine. With the sniping and things like that, it just guarantees you that when you get your 2 armor bane shot, take out the command unit, you will still have the unit there to basically trigger the planet ability. You just always have to be aware that once Aunshi or his Ethereal Envoy, once they swing, they have to run away. And I've even got caught with it. Sometimes I forget that, oh, I'm not going to have any units there. I can't win the battle at that point, and I have no way to get back. So it requires a lot of thinking at that point. You really have to plan out what you're doing. You have to focus more in the early game on getting your card draw. If you haven't already drawn what you feel like you need, you really need to get your card draw. Resources aren't so important because usually Aunshi units are fairly cheap. The attachments are fairly cheap. And what you need to set up maybe will run into the 4 to 6 resource cost, which you're getting 4 every turn. So you really need to focus on card draw more with Aunshi than resources. And that's how I like to play him. I'll go for a 2-card bonus planet all day. I will rarely try and get into a fight unless I have my marksman, an ion rifle, or a gun drone in my opening hand that I can chuck on the first planet if I need to win it, basically.
Sure. Well, are there any specific warlords or cards that really provide a bit of a counter? Like, Archon's Terror certainly hurts in depleting your forces even faster than them, moving back to your HQ themselves. The Land Raider helps counter that, but any other cards really pose a bit of a problem for you?
Suppressive Fire from AM. Also, their support that routes a unit, the Inquisitorial Fortress, I think.
Right.
If that's right.
Exactly.
That card. Eldorath and his ability, plain and simple. Nullify is a killer. This terrible matchup having Eldorath. If I didn't mention that, Eldorath is a horrible matchup.
Right.
Just, if you're playing a good guy, he's all right. I'll wait for your Canyon Strike. As soon as you play it, Nullify, and it just pulls the rug right out from under you. There's nothing you can do. Best thing to do with Aunshi, if you're going to play one, have the second one in your hand. And that's all advice I can give there. Just be prepared for the Nullify, because it's going to be there.
Sure. Well, I suppose, do you have any personal favorite, cards or combos, apart from, the huge number of things you've already mentioned, any just personal favorites that you just find to be immensely effective?
The 2 that I like to run are 2 that I don't see a lot, but they're starting to gain more popularity, is Even the Odds. And this is a 1-cost event. Says action, move a target attachment to another eligible unit controlled by the same player. This card does not get enough credit. It is an amazing card. It is an offensive and a defensive card. Offensively, it protects those valuable attachments that I have for Aun'shi. If, I got a marksman there and he's exhausted and I thought I win the battle, all of a sudden, drop pod, here comes a BAV. I don't want to lose that gun drone or ion rifle. I have no recursion there. I need to move it. So play that card and move it to my number 2 valuable unit. Usually there's an Ethereal Envoy out there. And those guys, by the way, are great for an ion rifle. And my personal preference for ion rifles, because if, in my head, 1 attack, 3 health, 1 command icon. They retreat, force retreat when they swing. Put an ion rifle on them. They're 4 attack, 3 health, 1 command icon with the same effect.
Right.
But to me, that's a prelate. It's a 4/3 that has to retreat when it goes back. The only thing it doesn't do that the prelate does is add 1 attack.
Sure.
And I can bounce that thing around with the Orbital City, and it comes in with a Canyon Strike. And normally, if it's coming in with Armor Bane. So, I mean, I have a maximum of 3 prelates in my deck, and that was another reason for me cutting it. My thought process behind cutting the prelate, because I feel like I already have 3 in there.
Well, and just by merit of it retreating, if it's not sitting there at the planet to be a target for your enemy, then you're not, running the jeopardy of losing some of those critically valuable attachments and some of your oh-so-important ethereal units. So it definitely seems like a little fantastic combo there. Anything else you feel is worth mentioning in regard to, clever card plays or synergies?
Just to finish up even the odds, it's a great defensive card. You got your Plague Banner, your Tempest Blade. Plague Banner, Kugath, it gives him +1 health. It also lets him move an additional damage from him to another unit at the planet. It's a nasty card.
Sure.
The Tempest Blade is for Space Marines Kato. It gives him the +1 attack and Armor Bane, so that gives him a 3 Armor Bane swing. That just makes him a tank and no one you want to deal with. Another great thing, if you're playing an Eldorath player, I've noticed a trend in people using the mobility attachment. Basically, it's Eldorath's signature attachment. It's a 3 shield card, gives a unit mobility. A lot of people like playing them on Starbane's Council, which is a 3/3 body, 1 command icon. And when a unit is exhausted, they get +2 attack. So they can swing for 5 on an exhausted unit. And since Eldorath is exhausting a unit when it comes in, that's just perfect synergy. So if you're going through the deployment phase and you see them put it on, a council on planet 2, well, I even the odds it to a unit way down at planet 5. Now no longer that unit is being factored into planet 1, so that gave me a huge boost. I mean, it's an amazing card. Like I said, I can't speak enough about it. If you haven't tried it, give it a shot. You will not regret it.
Well, it definitely sounds perfect to kind of pick apart some of those things your opponent can try to do to counter, your unit where you've put all of your eggs in one basket in.
Right.
I suppose, just in regard to Aun'shi as a whole, he hasn't necessarily performed tremendously well in a competitive context, in regard to the number of regional tournaments won, things like that. He had a presence at the Gen Con North American Championships that just concluded, but I didn't hear about any players that necessarily made it past the top 16, or maybe even into the top 16 that were playing Aun'shi. But do you consider him competitive? Do you think he's as broken as some people think he is?
And this is going to sound odd. No. I do not think he's broken, but if I had gone to the North America Championships, I would not have taken Aun'shi. Do I think he is an awesome warlord and great for tournaments? Yes. This is where you get into tournament size and endurance. Aun'shi is a great warlord, but he doesn't have the endurance because you rely so heavily on the draw. You're not going to get the perfect draw every time. If you're playing 6, 7 rounds, you're going to hit a few games where he's just not going to hit it because it's so dependent on the Orbital City and, Canyon Strike and being able to move around. Like I said, there's probably better Aun'shi players out there than me, and this is just my opinion. Davis covered it very well, and I respect his matchups against Aun'shi, and I believe 100% he has done what he does, but he hasn't played me. I'll give him that. I'm not saying I could beat him, And I've
Sure.
already issued a challenge, but that's more my fault because, like I said, I don't have internet, so I can't play him on Octagon.
Right.
So I'm sure as soon as I do that, he'd be more than willing to play me. And I'd love to play my Aun'shi deck against him. Aun'shi is a good warlord, and I believe one did make it into the top 16, but he is, even with all the extra things that I tried to do to make him more stable, there's still too much instability in him. Because
Certainly.
I have to rely on winning in the first round of combat, in the first swing sometimes. And sometimes that's really hard to set up, and I just can't do it.
Well,
Um,
I mean, it definitely sounds like not only is there a very high skill ceiling when it comes to Aunshi, you're definitely more prone to being victimized by a little bit of that random draw than some other warlords, just because he is definitely a little bit more combo reliant than some others. So just like you were saying, over the course of a tournament, if you're playing a large number of games, the range of inconsistency, I think, is probably pretty wide for Aunshi relative to some other, command officers. And I just think that's going to hurt in the long run. And just because so much has to be going right, it seems like you always have to be making the right decisions. The more choices you have to make, if you're playing, 6, 7, 8 games back to back, I think it's all the more likely that even some of the best players in the world are eventually going to make some mistake that, in a situation like running a finicky warlord like this, it can definitely cost you a game or a tournament.
right, and you are 100% correct. And that's also another point I wanted to say was that someone else had said this, and I heard it from him, and it just like the little light bulb came on. Aun'shi rewards perfect play. It's that simple. When you're
Sure.
playing, like you just said, it's a high skill ceiling. To play him effectively, you really, really need to understand Conquest and the mechanics of the game. Not just everything that comes into Aun'shi, but the game itself, the action rounds, passing on actions, who, gets first choice on initiative turns, like retreating units. Technically, there's an order to that. I mean, there's a lot of things that get glossed over in some games that really need to be exploited with Aun'shi when you're playing with him, because it really depends on winning or losing a game.
Definitely. I suppose for maybe newer players or players looking to give Aunshi a try, whether it's the first time or whether they maybe got frustrated because those combo pieces weren't, coming together their first few games, any just advice or suggestions so that people maybe don't give up hope, or just basic gameplay advice in addition to what you've already covered?
Right? Personally, Aun'shi will make you a better player. If you play Aun'shi, it'll make you a better player. Because you have to understand the game itself to play him effectively. So that will actually, I feel like everyone should play Aun'shi, honestly, for the experience. He's fun to play. It's fun, throwing the Ethereal Wisdom, giving a Borkan recruit who is a 2 cost, 2 attack, 2 health, 1 icon. And when it is at the planet with a warlord, it gets +2 attack. You Ethereal Wisdom that unit, which gives him the Ethereal trait and also +1 attack. And then you use a Canyon Strike, and this is a heavy combo, but something that I managed to pull off in the finals at Regional, and it was super gratifying. Canyon Strike him to the planet where the enemy warlord is, and you can swing for 5 armor bane at that point.
Right.
And, a 6 health warlord, that immediately, they're like, oh no, what am I going to do? They're playing cautious from that point. So now you have affected the game as a whole. And Aun'shi's really, I feel, the only warlord who can pull off stuff like that. That turn 1, you got to be eyes open, ready to go when you're playing Aun'shi, because you know what can happen. If you've messed with them, if you've played games with them, you know what can happen turn 1. You don't. Some warlords, I feel, you start turn 1 and you both just kind of go through the motions. You play your command units. You go to planet 1, they go somewhere else. You kill a command unit, kill a command unit, so on and so forth. With Aun'shi, you got to have your head in the game turn 1. And that type of mentality will make the Aun'shi player and the opponent better for it, because it forces you to really weigh your decisions when you're playing command units. Like, do I want to go here? Well, if I go here and I try and snipe his unit, well, I won't have a unit there to win the battle. So maybe I want to put that there. So instead of maybe trying I'm just putting it there for a bonus, I'm putting a unit there to make sure I have one there so I can win the battle and activate the ability from the Aun'shi player standpoint.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and just, you happen to mention, too, knowing exactly what to expect coming out of your opponent. So if you fail to realize, you're going up against an Eldar player, there's a Wraith Guard on the top of their discard pile, and they've got 2 resources.
And they're just smiling at you, too,
yeah.
and you know it's coming.
Right, you're setting yourself up for a very bad time, so it seems like it definitely rewards experience, perhaps more so than most other Warlords we've seen. And certainly I would encourage all players out there to give him a try, because from the way that you paint it out to be, it seems like an absolutely spectacular way to make this game even more stressful than it already is.
Yes.
I suppose just to instill some, sense of excitement and enthusiasm into people. You mentioned your regional performance, but any other just awesome memories or experiences you'd like to share where everything has come together and you've really been able to make Aun'shi shine?
Really, my whole shining moment was the entire day at regionals. Like, I just was on point with my game. I had everything set up perfectly. The only kind of sort of game was the last one where I had to pull off what I bloodied Kit turn 1. For people that seen it, it was a terrible fundamentals game. If you're trying to learn Conquest, do not watch that game. The first turn is great from my standpoint, but the rest of the game was awful. I made probably the worst possible commit decisions and deployment decisions I could have. But we were, I think, 8 hours in at that point, and I was tired. I had a 2.5-hour drive home,
Right.
and I was just toast. And I was playing probably the best DE player in our meta. And if you want to see good DE play, watch that game as a DE player, because that is how you play DE, the way he plays it. It's just a phenomenal guy. His name's Brad, but we're talking about Aunshi, so I'll get back to that. Other great things with him is, honestly, anytime I can pull off an Armor Bane Area of Effect attack, I get that warm, bubbly feeling inside.
Sure.
It's just great to pull that off, and then, 4 units of theirs are just gone, and there's literally nothing they can do about it. Indomitable's not going to save you. I mean, Iron Halo on your Warlord, that's about it. I mean, there's really not much anyone can do about it right now. And that's really, Aun'shi's give and take, He'll be there for you for one game, he'll give you the cards, and you'll just have an awesome time, and you'll steamroll. Next game, you'll get nothing, and you'll get your teeth kicked in.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's a funny relationship to, play this Warlord, and, the emotional roller coaster you'll go on trying to play him competitively. But in the end, it is worth it, and it will always make you a better player to experience a Warlord like this as a Conquest player.
Well, most definitely. And considering that regardless of what Warlord you ultimately play, you're at some point likely to have to go up against an Aun'shi, why not leverage the odds in your favor by mastering his gameplay and knowing exactly what he can pull off? So definitely a fascinating character, to be sure. I guess for players specifically going against Aun'shi, if it just seems like there's absolutely nothing they can do, they're the player always removing 4 units at a time from whatever planet you're attacking them at. Any final bits of advice for how to try to route, how to beat Aun'shi?
This is a little tougher, because I am also of the mindset, once Aun'shi gets rolling and he has someone on the back foot, if you're playing an Aun'shi player, barring, Doom or board wipe cards, or like a key, Archon's Terror followed by Gift of Isha, that's really only covering the Eldorath matchup.
Sure.
And I really feel Eldorath is kind of the only Warlord, maybe besides Kugath, but Eldorath is the best comeback when it comes to Aun'shi. If Aun'shi's got you on your back foot, I've probably got, if I'm the Aun'shi player, I've got my range guy out, and he's got a gun drone on him, and personal preference, whenever I have a gun drone, I put it on the Valor Marksman, which is a 1 cost, 1 attack, 2 health, 1 command icon with a ranged keyword. Right. And just range AoE 2 is the nuts, basically, when it comes to Aun'shi. So I save gun drones for them specifically. I don't put them on anyone else unless the situation dictates otherwise, which it rarely will. And like I said, iron rifles on envoys, because they basically turn into mini prelates at that point.
Right. Well, how might an opponent stop you from getting to the point where, you know, you've generated enough momentum that you're effectively unstoppable?
Bodies. You really need to get your bodies out. What I've found sometimes kind of works is doubling up your command units, not just maybe singling out, you know, a planet, you know, a 1 unit for 1 planet. Well, you know, put 2 units on 2 planets and protect it from the snipe at that point. That's usually for planets 3, 4, and 5 because, you know, they're farther away. There's chances of a big battle not happening there. But, you know, in every game, there's those planets where a command unit just sits there and it's basically a command battle for 3 to 4 turns, you know, and nothing happens there battle-wise. Or if there is a battle, it's really just to snipe the units. Right. So with Aun'shi, take advantage of his forced retreat. Know that it's coming. If the Orbital City's out, yes, you have to account for it. There's really not much you can do unless you have an ambush, an event like Drop Pod Assault, routing. Some good plays I've seen from Space Marines is, well, I'll come in, I'll snipe, and I'll run away knowing I can't win the planet, but then they'll pop in an eager recruit and activate the battle ability. Things like that, just thinking ahead. Also, what a lot of people miss is that Orbital City, when he pops back, he doesn't just get to attack again. It's still your attacking round. So take advantage of an Aunshi player getting greedy at that point. Almost every faction has a way of, you know, pumping out a good 3-4 damage strike, possibly more. And throughout the game, people hold those in their hands for the key battles or things like that. When playing Aunshi, save it for where you're going to need it, basically. If it has to be on the board prior, you know, it's going to be a key battle or a planet ability Aunshi might want to, you know, activate, like Planum, I believe is the one where you get to move a unit. You know, maybe set up that unit there and have the event card in your hand ready to go because you know Aunshi's going to come back. He's going to go there. He's going to pop him. He might come back. And at that point, you can still swing. And Aunshi's also tricky because he's very difficult to bloody, but you can catch Aunshi. It's just a little bit harder than everybody else. And you really have to be aware of what's on the board as the opponent, and knowing board presence is very important. Knowing what's going on, accounting for what's in the hand, basically. And that just kind of goes back to the baseline of Conquest. Know your cards, know your game. Basically, know what's in your hand, know what's in your opponent's hand. Everyone, when you play Conquest, give each Warlord a shot. If you just have your favorite Warlord, at least take the cards in your Conquest box and read them. Understand what they do. Know what they do. Just learn them, and it will make you a better player, even if you never play with them.
Sure. I have a card image slideshow screensaver on my laptop here, so whenever I walk by, I see a different random card pop up on the screen, so definitely helps with knowing exactly what's out there.
And that's brilliant. Everyone should do that, I think. I might do that now with all these new cards coming out.
Sure.
I got to get ready for the Tyranids.
Well, I suppose it's as convenient a time as any now that we've finally seen the Great Devourer pre-release to have concluded the initial round of this Community Spotlight series. So before we bring things to a close here, anything else that you feel is worth mentioning or sharing for our community, Ryan?
I just want everyone to know we have a great community. I haven't been a part of many others, but I have heard stories, and I feel like Conquest is in a great place. We have a lot of great, you know, influential, supportive players out there that are looking to help people. And if you're a new player listening to this, go on Card Game Database. You can contact me, Boxduck. Feel free. I will give you everything I know. I mean, you got Itewa, Buzzsaw MF, Tater54, all the guys from the Comcast. I mean, I think we have 4 or 5 different podcasts. Just as a new player, understand that you are in a good place right now, and this is a great game to get into. Even if you think you missed the first wave, you haven't missed anything. This is a great game. Get into it, learn it, love it, and enjoy it.
Sure. I mean, I've made maybe, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I feel like I've established a significant presence in the community, and I've only I've owned the game for a long time, but I've only really picked it up in the last 2 months or so, so I definitely never think it's too late to get started. I definitely can't say enough good things about our community. I never cease to be amazed at just how inviting people are, despite the competitive nature of this card game, and I've had scarcely a bad experience with our community so far, so feel free to change that in the comments below if you feel so compelled, but I suppose with that said, thank you very much for your time, Ryan, and I appreciate your coming on.
No problem. I'll give you one thing because you deserve cookies too. If y'all don't know Mitch, you need to know Mitch. You need to get on Card Game Database. Look at his forums, the Hive Tyrant. Check out his YouTube channel. If you're a new player, watch some videos. Pick Warlord, watch your Warlords video. You will learn a lot. More than just me blowing hot air about Aun'shi. Watch all these videos. Mitch does a lot of good work, and anyone would benefit from listening to what you do, basically.
Well, thank you very much. Maybe I should change my moniker to Saint Hive Tyrant or something, but
Right.
Thank you very much, sir, and you have a fine rest of your day.
You too, Mitch.
Well, with our interview having ultimately come to a close, I'll just conclude this video by saying thank you once again for watching, and I very much hope you've enjoyed all the interviews for each and every one of Conquest's first 14 Warlords, but nevertheless, do be sure to leave a comment, sharing your own thoughts, opinion, perspective, and experience when it comes to Aun'shi and the Tau faction as a whole. Interaction with viewers like you is quite sincerely the absolute highlight of my creating content for this channel, so please take a moment to let me know what you thought of not just this interview, but indeed the first full season of Community Spotlight interviews as a whole, and let me know what kind of interviews or other content you'd like to see next. If you happen to know someone that might make a good candidate to star alongside myself in a future video, I definitely encourage you to share, and I'd love to get suggestions from community members for what kind of content to make next. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you have not done so already. Please feel free to contact me directly and keep in touch through any social media outlet you'd like. But in any case, thank you once again for watching, and be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.